It's never simple.
Today, we're getting answers. I'll finally uncover why my head gasket blew, what that awful noise was, and we'll figure out whether this engine is ready for dyno tuning or the scrap bin.
Here we go again.
Last fall, I popped the head gasket in my T5 swapped Volvo on the first drive after swapping in MaxxECU. Then, right after replacing the head gasket a few weeks later, the engine made some concerning noises on startup. There were lots of ideas in the comments, with the most common suggestion being that hydraulic lifters weren't yet pumped up with oil, and I had hoped that this was all that it was. I now know, however, that it was not simply lifter noise. Today, we'll perform some due diligence to ensure that the foundations are calibrated correctly before measuring the health of the engine.
So there are a couple things that I want to do to test the engine health. First, I want to reset and double check how I set up base ignition timing before, which means I first need to double check the timing mark that I made indicating when the engine is at true top dead center. I'll remove the spark plug, drop a socket extension into that spark plug hole so it rests on the piston crown, and that will move up and down with the piston. And then I can have the dial indicator sitting above that with the pin of that dial indicator resting on that extension, riding up and down, so I can see very precisely when that piston is at top dead center. All right, I just went ahead and checked my marks for top dead center, and my old top dead center mark was off. I'm happy that I found that, but also just annoyed at how many times I've screwed up base timing on this car. It should be something that's simple, but it's so easy to screw up for some reason. And I made sure to double check that 3 times. Because I've now become so paranoid about truly getting the timing set up right, I'm not just going to use that one measurement using the dial indicator. I am also going to double check that by using a piston stop that threads into the spark plug hole and provides a physical stop for the piston. So you put that piston stop in the engine, you rotate the engine until it hits that one way, and at that point you make a mark. And then you rotate it the opposite way until it hits it on the opposite end of the stroke. Then you make another mark. So then you're left with 2 marks, and top dead center is the exact center of those 2 marks. Using those 2 methods, I can be really confident that I have true top dead center and a good, reliable reference for setting the base timing for the engine. Now I just need to grab the timing light, put that in place, and then adjust the base timing to reflect our new top dead center mark. I just checked base timing using the timing light and the new top dead center mark that I made, and that pretty much immediately revealed that I had that base timing set 27 degrees advanced from where it should be. So the timing was massively advanced. That explains very clearly why I had problems and why we blew that head gasket. Way too much ignition timing. So after finding that it was that far off, I moved that setting. So the good news is that that is solid now. We know that that's right. And I even got some validation that that was the right adjustment to make, because as soon as I adjusted the timing and dialed that back, the 27 degrees or whatever it was, 26 degrees maybe, the engine was idling way better. That's encouraging. The only thing I'm a little unsure of right now is that I saw a lot of blue oil smoke come out of the exhaust when I ran it that time. That really reaffirms to me the idea of doing a leak down test to see what the condition of the engine is and make sure that we have a good seal on the rings and the valves and there isn't an issue there. Hopefully it's just a little residue that burns off and we can move forward with doing some real tuning. But so far, just the progress of getting the base timing set right and having the engine run a lot smoother, I'm feeling good. Carrying some positive thoughts into the leak down test. Let's see what that does. All right, so next step, we've got to pull out all of these coils and pop the spark plugs out as well. It's moments like this that I'm really thankful to have a clean engine and engine bay, because doing all of this diagnostics and troubleshooting is far more pleasant when you're not getting super dirty from every single thing that you touch. All right, we've got the coils out, we have access to the spark plugs. All right, now I can read the instructions again to remind myself of what to do. Remove spark plugs, check. Disconnect coils, check. Remove the oil dipstick, remove the radiator cap, PCV hose. Okay, so now we need to get the piston that we're testing up to top dead center. So I'll probably resort to putting a socket extension in there and just waiting for it to rise to the top and look at that visually and kind of by feel. That should be close enough for what we're doing here. Alrighty, that is top dead center. All right, the tester has this little hose, and then there are two adapters. These are for the two common spark plug sizes. This is just hand tight. There's an O-ring on there. It'll seal it enough for what we're doing. And then it has a quick disconnect fitting that you can see here. You can take this, drop that in, and then thread that in just by hand. Just getting this finger tight is enough. The Leakdown tester uses compressed air, pushing compressed air into that combustion chamber and then measuring what percentage of that is escaping past something. There will always be some amount of leak down happening from the engine, so it's never going to be the case that you have 0%. We want to see a relatively low percentage of leak down, and we also want to see that each of the cylinders is relatively consistent. The packages for the tester said something like 10 to 15% variance between them. Hopefully we have these really quite consistent across each of the cylinders. That shows that there's not one cylinder that has an issue. Now, if I remember, you need to start with this all the way counterclockwise, which means there's no pressure, and then connect this and then slowly start raising the pressure. They recommend going somewhere between 7 and 100 PSI, which is kind of crazy, so we're just gonna go for like 10 to start. All right, this is up at 30 PSI. And I'm seeing roughly 22% leak down. You might be wondering why I'm doing a leak down test and not just doing a compression test. A compression test will still tell me the general health of the engine, but it'll only tell me good or bad and to what degree. It won't help me figure out if there is a problem, where is that problem coming from? If it's not building compression, well, where is that going? Where's the air escaping? That is what a leak down test does. That helps you diagnose, is it escaping past the rings into the bottom end? Is it escaping past the intake valves? Is it escaping past the exhaust valves? So that's why a leak down test is much more valuable as a diagnostic tool. So we'll check the oil dipstick, we'll listen at the intake, and I will also listen at the tailpipe by the exhaust. It's kind of hard to hear in right now because the furnace is running to keep this place warm. I can definitely hear air coming out of that. So I know that a good amount of leak down is coming from the dipstick tube connected to the crankcase. That means the source of that would be the air that is passing beyond the rings. I just listened to the tailpipe. I didn't hear anything from there. So far it seems like that is mostly from that dipstick tube in the crankcase. So 22% leak down for cylinder number 1. I'm gonna take a quick photo to remember that. Now we're gonna turn off the airflow here. Gonna disconnect that guy. We'll take this out. Then we need to rotate the crank again to get piston 2 to top dead center. Pull that extension out, put this adapter in there, and then do the same thing. So we're gonna do that for each of these 5 cylinders. Same thing, 22. Same thing, 22. Cylinder number 4 is almost always the problematic one in these engines. "22. Well, the good news is that these are all dead on consistent, which is a very, very good thing so far. We will see if number 5 is as well. Fingers crossed. All right.
Unlike the first 4, when I applied pressure to cylinder 5, it showed a very high leakage percentage that slowly reduced as I ramped up pressure.
That was not behaving as nicely as the others, so that might not be at top dead center. Let's see. Try that again. Up, 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 up. Took a lot more air pressure to get a leak down reading than the other ones did. So hopefully that just means one of those valves was open.
At first, I thought this might have been because of an error that I made in rotating the crank, so I tried again a few times to rule that out, but I got the same result each time. Cylinder 5 showed very high leakage that gradually reduced with more pressure applied.
So I can hear that coming from the dipstick. It almost sounds like bubbling down in there. That was somewhere in the 60 to 40% leak down realm, depending on the pressure. I had to give it a lot more pressure than I did on the other cylinders. So that's pretty bad. Not only as far as the percentage of leak down, but all other cylinders were rock solid even at 22%. That one was sitting at 40 to 60%. That's bad. That is a big, bright, flashing sign saying something is wrong with cylinder 5. And given where I'm hearing the air escaping, that's saying something is wrong with cylinder 5 in the block with that piston or the cylinder wall itself. I'm gonna say it's probably with that piston. Maybe there was some ring damage, maybe there was ring land damage. I don't know exactly what, but yeah, I probably have an issue down there. That sucks. That's what I was hoping to not find, but it's pretty conclusive that there's an issue here. That is a very clear sign that cylinder 5 is hurt. Actually, that leak down is even worse than I thought. Somewhere between 40 and 80% leak down. At like 20 PSI, it's like 80% leak down. If you crank it up near 100, then you get around like the 38 to 40% leak down mark. Not great. I need to think. We're gonna shut this off. All right, so let's reflect on where we're at with this now. So I verified the timing mark for top dead center using the dial indicator as well as the piston stop to make sure that that mark is completely accurate. And I reset the base timing based on that mark, which revealed that the base timing was previously about 26 degrees off. That is what blew the head gasket before and started this whole thing. So with that, I had a good base to start being able to tune the engine. However, we needed to make sure that the engine was actually healthy. So I went ahead and did a couple health checks. First, I did a leak down test, and that revealed that cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all very even at 22% leak down with a cold and dry engine. And it showed that cylinder 5 has very excessive leak down, somewhere in the 40 to 80% range, depending on the pressure. And given that I heard all of that air coming out of the dipstick tube, there's most likely some damage in there on that 5th piston. I did a compression test as well, and that showed compression was around 62 PSI on cylinder 5. That is way, way, way low, so that's consistent with the leak down test. For reference, I also tested the compression on the other cylinders, and that was right at 156 PSI, and that's a little low, but it is within spec according to Volvo. To try to get a little bit more information on the condition of the engine, now that I've done the leak down and compression test, I'm gonna take out my scope and just run that scope into cylinder 5 and see if I can see anything different in there. I haven't looked in there since that first start when I had all the weird noises and other things have been going on. All right, I've got the scope in the bore. It's always kind of hard to see and tell exactly where you're looking. It's really easy to flip this around backwards so your view is upside down. Whoa, that is new. Okay, there's some really nasty marks in here. There are little marks all over the top of the piston toward the edge that look a lot like they were made by a ball bearing or something. And actually, it looks like I can see them on both the intake and exhaust side. So that changes things. Now that I can see that there's this much damage to the piston and likely matching damage to the head from wherever that foreign object ran into both, that really means that this is not going to be an engine that I want to reuse anymore. The damage is just a little bit more than I want to have, and it just doesn't make sense. If this car stays 5-cylinder powered, that means finding a replacement engine for it. Now I know, it wasn't valve train noise, it wasn't the hydraulic lifters needing to pump up with oil and the cams just kind of beating into those lifters before they got pumped up. It was foreign object damage. I don't know where that would have come from, but there's only one spot on this car that has an object like that. So I'm gonna check real quick and see if that's still in place or if that came apart, and then we'll talk about what that is. So this is it. This is a banjo bolt check valve. This is used by the PCV system. There is a little ball bearing in here and a spring. It is actually something that they designed a revised part because of issues like this happening, where that piece of the check valve fails and it releases that foreign object into the engine and does damage very similar to what I'm looking at here right now. So, is this actually bad? Is this what failed? Is this what killed the engine? No, it's not. This is actually intact. This is the revised part. So I'm good on that end. However, the engine is still no less damaged. We just don't have an answer of a simple valve failing. So what I know now is some foreign object got into the engine, bounced around in cylinder 5 for quite a while until it seems to have left, or maybe got fully embedded in the head. But if it did leave, the only way for it to go out is through the exhaust manifold, and on the other end of the exhaust manifold is the turbo. So if that object went into the turbo, it would have gone into the turbine and probably completely destroyed that turbine wheel. So let's hope that that's not the case, and there is some ball bearing looking object just crammed into the head, and that turbo will still be usable. That turbo is a genuine ball bearing turbo from Garrett. It is not cheap. I've had to have it be rebuilt a couple times. Hopefully that isn't damaged as well. Otherwise, that basically doubles the repair bill for this. It's never the easy thing. So the other thing I just realized is I had an issue not too long ago when I went to move the car out of the garage. I started it up, and as soon as I started it, it was running like crap, didn't want to stay running. So it was obvious that it was running on 4 cylinders again, and ultimately narrowed it down that the spark plug had failed. And when I pulled that spark plug out, I saw that the gap had been completely closed up. So there was no gap anymore. And at the time, I couldn't figure out how that possibly could have happened. It didn't make any sense to me. It's not really possible for the piston to have hit it, but this explains that. That damage in cylinder 5, which is the one that I didn't have spark on and had to replace the spark plug for, that foreign object that was in there must have hit the spark plug and closed that gap and killed that spark plug. All right, we're gonna close this thing up for a little bit and do some thinking, figure out what the best path is to go. If you asked me a couple months ago if I would consider rebuilding the engine or putting a new 5-cylinder engine in this car, the answer would absolutely have been no. Absolutely not. I was just done with the idea of doing anything else to this engine on this car. But now I'm kind of in a different headspace. I'm open to that, but I also want to be smart about it. On one hand, there is a lot about this setup that is really well refined and figured out, and a lot of work that I've put in over the course of years. And it just feels like it's right on the edge. It's right on the cusp of being great and allowing me to just drive it and use it. And that is so tempting. I really want that. I like the idea of the 5-cylinder in the car because it's just kind of a cool, uncommon engine. I like that it's a Volvo engine. But then on the other hand, I think about this from a kind of more detached, rational state, and I've blown up a number of these engines in this car. I've had this engine apart probably 6 times at this point, where I've had to build an all new block or get a new head or bore out the block and get new pistons, and it has been a lot. So at a certain point, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting it to go differently, you know, there's some stupidity in that too. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at right now, and some of the thoughts that I'm mulling around with this, of now that I know that the engine is hurt, the block is hurt, cylinder 5 needs some work, I need to decide, what path do I want to go? Do I want to go down the road of seeing the 5-cylinder through and fixing that? Or do I call it quits here and say, enough's enough, it's time for a different swap? Let me know what you think. I'm curious to hear your thoughts or recommendations, whether it's around next steps with the 5-cylinder, or if you think there's a different swap that I should consider and kind of change the path going forward with this car. The one thing that I'm really feeling at the moment is I'm not letting go of this. I have a long history with this car at this point, and I want to see it through. It's time to figure out what comes next, what path to take, and get it done. If you made it this far into the video and you're liking what you're watching, consider subscribing. I'm really trying to grow this channel and share more and more of these projects with you over time. And you coming back to watch these videos again and again means so much to me. It's incredible seeing the feedback that I've gotten. It's just really cool to see the enthusiast community in general, whether it's Volvo, BMW, or any brand, people who just like cars and car projects or stories about working on cars. Thank you. It means so much to me.